years ahead of the dominant media. FirstAmendmentRadio.com and FirstAmendmentRadio.net.
Evening, folks. It's Barry Chamish. If you hear a weird voice, I have a cold. It's 100 degrees where I am. For those who don't believe in global warming, you should come live here right now. Boy, is it hot. All righty. The air conditioning gave me the cold, by the way. Now, look, we've got a really, really good show. And, well, our first guest is Judy Morris. She wrote an article called The USS Liberty, Israel and President Johnson's Order to Destroy the Liberty. And it's, you know what, it's worth 2 hours. We have a second guest who may just pitch in. That'll be Robert Morrow. But I want you to stick around, Judy. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you for having me on, Barry.
Oh, my pleasure. Let's get this over with. And by the way, you have to help me here. I'm all clogged up. Now, look, I knew Peter Hunem. I never thought that this would carry on. I met a pilot. I was in the Air Force. One way or another, I met him, and he said we saw the American flag, and we just dumped our bombs in the Mediterranean. And I wrote it up, and somehow Peter Hunem, who was working for the BBC, very different political point of view of mine as well, looked me up. He was at my home, and I'm acknowledged in the book. He traced down the pilot somehow. Turns out he was arrested upon landing, and my story checked out. That's it. That's everything. That's me. Now let's go with Judy. Look, let's just start with the fact that the mission didn't work. That if Israel wanted to sink the Liberty, Israel had the power to sink the Liberty, but not if the bombs are not aimed at it. All right, take it from there. It went awry.
That's absolutely true, Barry. The firepower that Israel had with the combined forces of their Air Force and their Navy could easily have sunk the USS Liberty in a minute if they wanted to. That did not happen.
Why use the Navy? The Air Force could have done it, but neither here nor there they did. Now, they managed to get an SOS out, and LBJ, now this is your claim, you better back it up, he called it back twice, the rescue crew, to save the Liberty. Let's talk about this now. The background, please.
Okay, well, you know, the story, my USS Liberty Peace is titled The Most Incredible Story Never Told. You know, LBJ, the USS Liberty, Israel, and LBJ's order to sink the ship. I came across this story in 2012, and that's when I first read Hunan's book. And I was totally captivated by it. It totally blew me away because I knew about the USS Liberty, but it never made any sense to me. And I just did not, it just didn't make any sense that Israel, our ally, would sink a U.S. ship, you know? And so the thing was always, you know, scrambling around in the back of my mind. And once I read Hunan's book, all the dots started to connect. Suddenly, the whole thing made sense in a very perverse sort of way. So when you look at that gorgeous sunny day when the USS Liberty, 294 sailors were out there, and all of a sudden they were being attacked by the Israeli Air Force, a bunch of amazing things started to happen at that point. Like, the most amazing thing, despite the deck being napalmed and burning, I think 8 people burned to death on that thing, the Israelis thought that they had knocked out all the communications equipment, okay? Well, a guy, I've got his name here, I'll dig it up in a second, he went and jury-rigged all the communications equipment to the point where it could work. And at that point, he thought it would work, but the Israeli Air Force had radar jamming technology. And then they were, oh my God, we're screwed. This is not going to work. But they were smart enough. Somebody there was listening, and they discovered one thing. When the Israelis were dropping the bombs, the radar jamming technology did not work, and they had a few seconds, a window of opportunity that was literally nothing more than a few seconds to get a message out. And that's where they think that message out.
You have to slow down. That's
okay.
Number one, the issue of the bombs being dropped. My source said that bombs were dropped into an empty sea, and that's why the Navy had to come in. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I'll give you the name of the brave wiremen who, despite the napalm on the deck, managed to get the transformers to send out the SOS. All these names I have from your article. But
yeah, and I have it right here, too.
All right. It's not important because who remembers them? But more to the point.
Well, it is important because they were important people in history who's, you know,
and who's intellect
and quick thinking. Yeah. So anyway.
Wait, what's his name then if he's so important?
I've got his name right here. Just give me a second. I'll find it if you can just keep talking. I've got like an 11-page.
Yeah,
my
I've got it too.
It's an 11-page synopsis, book review.
It's okay. It's not important. Now, in short, the SOS got through.
Richard Sturman, S-T-U-R-M-A-N. Richard Sturman, S-T-U-R-M-A-N.
Very good. One of many, many names. Now, my information was the killing bombs weren't aimed at the Liberty, and it survived the air attacks. That was my information.
Well, the information that I got from Hunan's book, there was one air missile that did hit it, and it hit some kind of control room. But when the ship, you know, I think it ended up, going to Malta or someplace, it had been riddled with a lot of holes from machine gun fire, which they believe came from the Israeli torpedo boats. They machine gunned it, but they didn't torpedo it.
There's a lot of things wrong, but I'd say disobeying a direct order to sink an American ship should be stressed. I believe I met the guy. He was telling the truth. They didn't follow orders. They didn't want to sink the Liberty, the Israeli pilots.
And that's why your knowledge of the Israeli government, which is kind of a weak link in my report because I don't know much about these guys, I believe that there was massive insubordination below, the guy who was orchestrating this with LBJ, and they had just decided, no, we're not going to do this. And when they went out there...
Moshe Dayan, the defense minister, he was giving orders from the Israeli side. And I'm not going into that, but the pilots didn't like the order. They saw an American flag, and they knew they weren't at war with America. From the Israeli side, there was massive insubordination that saved the Liberty.
Exactly. And that is the untold story of this whole thing, because if Israel wanted to, it could have sunk the thing in a minute or two. As it turned out, this crazy farce of an attack, at least according to Hunan and all the witnesses, that he interviewed, went on for an hour and a half. It was an hour and a half. Believe me, Israel didn't need an hour and a half if they wanted to sink that ship. It was not that big of a boat anyway.
No, it was such a crassly, not just dangerous. It meant sinking an ally's spy ship. Now, look, by the way, what the Israelis were told, they were leaking information to Syria. Now, on June 8th, by the way, it wasn't 4 days. The Six-Day War was the 5th. It was the third day. You keep repeating 4th. It's not. It's the third day. The Syrians were gone. The Egyptians were gone. The war was over. Who cares what they were leaking? That's the excuse the Israeli public were given why we attacked an American ship. They were leaking.
And, I addressed that in there. That doesn't hold water, okay? It makes no sense because the 6-Day War was over in an hour. It was done. The Egyptian Air Force was wiped out. So to use the excuse, actually they used the excuse that they thought it was some kind of an Egyptian war vessel or something. And
they said it was delivering horses. That one
delivering horses, some cockamamie thing. And so anyway, that absolutely made zero sense. I mean, and another thing that Hunan brings up is that a U.S. spy ship is easily recognized. It's got satellites and wires. It's strung up, from all over. You can't miss it. Anybody who knows what a spy ship is you cannot miss a U.S. spy ship, at least back then. Unlike the Russians who had trawlers and everything was disguised and you really couldn't tell. So it was clear that the American flag was flying. It's documented in Hunan's book that they actually put up a fresh new flag. It was a gorgeous day, perfectly clear. They can't claim bad weather. And it was clearly an American spy ship, and everybody knew it.
So my contribution to Peter certainly was that he tracked down the pilot. And by the way, I never believed it was a story. I didn't. Look, I had other stories. This was not. I didn't think it would go this far, but here we are talking about it. Apparently, Peter's thesis was largely guided by my information. I'll bet he wouldn't have got to the point that the Israelis kept it alive, kept it floating. They were ordered to sink it, but they kept it floating.
And it never really came close to sinking, although, there were deaths on board. But the amazing thing, besides the fact that they could repair the communication equipment, and then they thought, we can't use it because of the radar jamming, and that's all documented by Hunan, and I quote him in the article. Once they discovered that when they were dropping their bombs into the ocean, the radar jamming technology failed to work, and they had literally seconds. And that's when they pinged that message out that, hey, we were under attack by unidentified planes. And they never mentioned Israel in that first thing. Well, that message was so critical, everybody picked it up. The Russians picked it up. 2 U.S. embassies picked it up. It got pinged out to the world.
More to the point, 2 U.S. ships picked it up, and they were on the way to rescue the Liberty. And according to your article, you say that twice LBJ, along with his Secretary of the Military, that would be Robert McNamara.
Another criminal.
Well, that certainly you could get that. That implication is certainly there from your article. They ordered the rescue stopped twice. Go into that. Why did they order them stopped?
That information, I picked it up in Hunan's book somewhere. So it has been documented, at least by, insiders, as Hunan went back and tried to, retrace everything by talking to you and getting witnesses and doing everything that an investigative journalist is supposed to do. They believe that, and people on board, I think it was the USS Saratoga that got a message. People on those 2 ships have documented that they were ordered to come back despite getting that SOS distress signal. They were on their way to help the USS Liberty, and they were called back. Now, eventually, somebody got to them, and they were rescued, but it took a while, and supposedly, LBJ said point blank, I want that GD ship sunk.
No, he said, I want that goddamn ship at the bottom of the ocean.
At the bottom of the ocean. That's what he said.
That's the famous
And the other most amazing thing, Barry, the other really critically damning thing to LBJ is after that message got out and he had his oh shit moment while he was sitting in the White House, everybody knows now, was they never identified it, the attacker, as Israeli. And LBJ said, I will not embarrass an ally. Well, who would that be besides Israel? Like, how did LBJ know that the ship was attacked by Israel when the message that got pinged out only said the USS Liberty was under attack by an unidentified, aircraft?
Now, let's put the picture together. Now, you supply a quote. LBJ told a British journalist that he...
Oh, I love that.
Once he has somebody's pecker in his pocket, he rules him. Apparently, he had Moshe Dayan's pecker in his pocket because without Dayan, look, nobody would have given an order like that without the chief of staff. I'm sorry, that was Rabin. I made a mistake. The Minister of Defense ordering it. It was entirely, literally, it could not have been done without Moshe Dayan. And boy, was he blackmailed afterwards. Now,
okay, so you know that. See, I did not know that. That's one piece of the story that I did not know. Because even after doing the USS Liberty piece, I've been scratching my head. Who in the Israeli government went along with these, American psychopathic nuts?
Minister of Defense. Who else? Without the Minister of Defense, it wouldn't have happened. But the pilots, at least one, really did not want to follow this order. And he didn't follow the order, and things started going awry. Give Peter credit. He got to that point. He got to the point where the Israelis didn't want to sink it, but their minister, Dayan, did. He got to that point.
And why would Moshe Dayan do that? I mean, wasn't he some kind of Israeli hero?
His pecker was in LBJ's pocket. That's already been answered.
Okay, so back to where the pecker. Okay, yeah. I mean, and LBJ talked like that. He was. There are tons of stories about how crude and vulgar he was. That's exactly how he talked. I mean, the man was an absolute pig.
He was blackmailing Dayan, and the blackmail continued. But that's not for me to talk about. Let's go back to your expertise. Why would Johnson order rescues retreating? Why would he order ships to retreat instead of rescue them?
Well, because he still wanted the thing sunk, and he thought that, I really believe that LBJ thought that, hey, we're not going to rescue this, so this thing is going to go to the bottom of the sea. It's going to be sunk. And another thing that's important is the American political side, because why would LBJ do this? I mean, that's a huge question. He was under fire, very unpopular because the Vietnam War was raging, and that was bad, and he was in danger of losing not only the presidency, but maybe even in danger of not even being nominated by his own party. So LBJ was so obsessed with power. That's why he said, "Oh, what was that thing in Vietnam? The false flag attack."
The Gulf of Tonkin is the obvious comparison.
That's right. He said, "I want my Gulf of Tonkin resolution." He wanted a war, and it's so amazing. So, but the communications people. And the fact that they discovered that they could get a message out, and once that message went out to the world, everybody got it. I'm sure the Israelis got it. The Russians got it. They had a spy trawler nearby. It at least hit, according to Hunan, 2 U.S. embassies he documented got it. I mean, everybody in the world got it. LBJ got it. The Pentagon got it. The U.S.
Did they give his order to rescind the rescue? By the way, was via McNamara, according to your report. Did these same people hear L.B. McNamara order the rescue operation halted?
Well, I don't believe that McNamara would have done it without LBJ's orders. LBJ was his little,
They were in the room together, I'm sure. He was the Secretary of Defense. Now, again, did anyone hear the order to rescue the Liberty rescinded? Your report says twice.
Hunan discusses that, and he based those conclusions on his interviews with people on those other ships that were sailing towards the USS Liberty. Okay, so Hunan interviewed a lot of military personnel that were involved in it that were not on the USS Liberty. He interviewed all those people that he could find. And then he went out and he was interviewing people on these other ships. And that's what's so amazing. But then they took the injured people to different boats. And this
we'll
is
get
where
to that
more
shortly. Don't jump so quickly from the core here. You're talking about a planned false flag attack. Don't rush off to it. We'll get to them. You know what? The next hour, don't worry about Robert. You've got the next hour. You're not pressed now.
Oh,
and Robert
will
understand. Robert Morrow linked me with you. He'll understand. Now let's
Well, that's
do
okay.
this.
Barry, I need you to slow me down because I talk very, very fast. So slow me down.
But false flag, this is the core of your thesis. And you can't just, you have to say, look, a false flag, in other words, Liberty knew nothing about it. They didn't volunteer to be sunk. Who did know anything about it?
Well, what we know about it, and there's a quote in here, I'll have to find it, where LBJ is on record saying that, he wanted his Gulf of Tonkin resolution. Now, that is incredibly significant because it implies a false flag attack, which automatically implies an excuse to march off to war. And in this case, as the story unfolds, the story really unfolds by backtracking till 1 or 2 a.m. in the morning in California when, the pilots were ordered to man their ships to go off to war, to man their planes and sit there and wait. But we're going to get to that because that's another huge part of the story.
California is 9,000 miles away. They didn't have planes closer than that.
They had ordered planes in Spain, in California, in other places. I don't exactly. This is what nobody really knows. When you look at, and this is like the nuclear strike, the elite of the U.S. Air Force, and one of those guys was a 20-year veteran. They sit around, and when the orders come up, it's like, oh my God, this is it. We're going to nuke the planet. Nobody really knows the whole grand scheme of what was intended because there were at least 3 or 4 major nuclear U.S. air bases where they were put on alert. So what was the grand scheme? Well, we found out from one of the USS Liberty people that ended up, I think, on the USS Saratoga, who overheard a guy who was talking with...
he was a Jewish guy. I recognized him, and we'll get to him as well.
And we'll get to
That's
him.
kind of the punchline. His name was Mo. But let's get right to what you're claiming. This was a planned false flag. With
well,
what?
It's not my claim, Barry. It's Hunan's claim, and I believe Hunan. So I do believe that.
No, you wrote the article under your name quoting Hunan. Neither here nor there without getting to the ethics of journalism. Don't shift everything to Peter. Now, I'm going to say it again. What was the purpose of this false flag attack?
Well, it's a matter of speculation, okay?
Oh, I hate to do this to you. We have to take 3 minutes for commercials.
That's fine.
When we
I
come
can look
back,
up some of my quotes.
When we come back, I'll plug myself, you'll plug yourself, people will read this, and then we get to the why was there a false flag? Why was Israel called in to sink the Liberty? That's
a very important discussion.
Well, we'll start with that, then work backwards to the witnesses. All right, folks, this is Barry Chamish and my guest, Judy Morris. We'll be back in 3 minutes. Hang in there, Judy.
Okay.
Hear it first on FirstAmendmentRadio.com and FirstAmendmentRadio.net. The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening. Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity, invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host, Melody Cedarstrom, right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit DiscountGoldandSilverTrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free, 1-800-375-4188.
All right, folks, this is Barry Chamish. You get all my books at lulu.com, www.lulu.com. You'll see a search box right in my last name, Chamish, Chamish, and you'll get my books. And my website, and, well, I wrote a very powerful article last week, and it's not up yet, but have a look anyways, barrychamish.com. Judy, plug yourself and tell people how to see this article.
I will send the link to Barry, and
No. Just tell people what. Don't send it to me. Tell them how to get to your site.
The article, you can just Google Judy Morris Report and USS Liberty and Israel, and it will pop up. The article is on my blog, which basically, now this blog was written in 2013 because I was researching this in 2012, but it's a timeless story anyway. The blog title is The Most Incredible Story Never Told, the USS Liberty, Israel, and LBJ's Order to Destroy the USS Liberty. So you can either go to judymorrisreport.blogspot.com and go back to January of 2013, and you'll find the article there. Or it's easier to just pull it up by engine searching or Googling Judy Morris Report USS Liberty. It'll pop right up.
For anyone who missed that, we're archived for a week at libertyarchives.com, and you get you can hear it. I know that was pretty hard to write down and get right, but Judy Morris, once again, is Morris. All right, we did our best. Now let's get to the punchline. Then we'll get to the witnesses, and Robert will understand if we don't have full attention
we can,
to him.
we might be able to get this wrapped up, because I know I talked to Robert. It's important for him to get on your show. But anywhere there's...
It is?
Yeah, I mean, Robert likes being on your show, and
he
researches a lot
I
of
don't
things.
mean that. We've barely started. All right, first things first. But
anyway, Barry, what I wanted to point out...
What was the false flag?
This is where I want to start, okay?
Right.
It gets a little complicated because, first of all, that Nanjo guy, the commander who was in California, he said they were put on the bases in Spain, Britain, and Guam were put on the highest alerts, plus bases in the U.S. He did not name the U.S. bases, but he did know the U.S. bases were put on the highest alert, plus bases in Guam and Spain and Britain. Now, that's all. Let's just assume that that's all we know right now. Now,
that's funny, by the way. And by the way, get to the punchline. What were they carrying? First of all, Spain would have been where the plane would have taken off from, and not Guam. But let's go straight into it. What was?
Well, there were multiple planes that were readied for takeoff, and even Hunan said that Nanjo was reluctant to say exactly what he was carrying, but he would admit that it was a thermonuclear device.
Now we're getting there. Now,
okay,
if the false flag attack worked, in other words, if the Liberty went down, the planes would have gone up. Now let's paint what would have happened had the Liberty been sunk in 2 minutes.
Well, had the Liberty really went down according to the plan was to nuke Cairo, which back then was a city of 6 million people. Now I think it might be, 20 million, 6 million people. Now, this is where the story gets even more geopolitically complicated, because a lot of people are still going back, why would LBJ do this? Just to win an election. But then there was this guy, Hunan interviewed a guy named Joe Sorrells, S-O-R-R-E-L-S, back in the 60s, and he apparently had done a lot of, technical work, and he knew about this. He actually had connections with the Israeli Mossad and things. Anyway, this is a quote from Hunan. He says, from his viewpoint, he's talking about this guy, Joe Sorrells, he's a tech guy, it seems the Israelis are responding to pressure from the United States to eradicate Nasser. Israel was not the prime mover. According to Sorrells, that I'm quoting Hunan here, the warplanes went well. According to Sorrells, the war plans went well, the driving force being the U.S. Sorrells describes as horseshit the commonly held notion that Israel fought this war on its own. Now, they're talking about the Six-Day War. This is where the story gets complicated, because they're somehow tying this in.
I'd say nuking
the Six-Day
Cairo
War
is a major point. All right? Why would... Look, the ship is gone. We're pissed off.
Well, supposedly, the sinking of the U.S. Liberty was supposed to be an excuse, blame it on Egypt for some stupid ship carrying horses, allegedly, to expand this Six-Day War thing, because the U.S. was committed to knocking out Nasser. And to what extent Israel... Now, there's a lot of talk. I mean, like Ben-Gurion opposed the Six-Day War, and I quote him.
Oh, that's
straight
nonsense. Don't even go into that. Ben-Gurion was behind the Lavon affair that tried to bring down Nasser in 1954, and was thrown out of Don't do Israel. I'm telling you,
we're not going to do Israel. But however, there are people who say this whole Six-Day War thing was hatched by the United States, was never hatched by Israel. So this is where it gets
Israel
geopolitical.
was blockaded. The country was under total blockade. It was to break out of a blockade.
Well, what I do know about the Six-Day War is that the Israeli strike was preemptive.
That's for sure. After they were blockaded. Look, without diving into this, I buy that they might have got some really, really great intelligence from the United States. I don't buy that America knocked out the Egyptian Air Force. It was done by the Israeli Air Force. Now, the intelligence, that's something else.
Okay, Hunan agrees that the Israelis were a part of it, but Hunan also discusses, and we don't have to, I don't know much about how militaries operate. Hunan also said that there are people who believe that it was a joint strike between the U.S. and Israel because Israel alone did not have the firepower to knock out the whole Egyptian Air Force. I don't know if that's true.
It's not true. Look,
but the real point here, the real geopolitical point here, and it raises a ton of questions, is why would the U.S. Push Israel into the Six-Day War? And even if you assume that's true, which you don't happen to believe that it's true, and I am aware that it was supposedly a preemptive thing, strike, even if you assume that it's true, the Six-Day War was over in an hour. So why would we be doing this on the third or fourth day? It kind of tells me somebody wanted a full-blown nuclear war, and they wanted it real bad. What do you think?
Well, they wanted an excuse to expand, that's for sure. But, you nuke civilians. I don't think that looks good for America to nuke Cairo. It's probably going to be very unpopular.
Yeah, when you consider that nobody has been, nuked since World War II when we nuked Japan. I mean, dropping a nuclear bomb is a huge, huge thing.
Well, your scenario is that once the Liberty went down, the nukes 3 minutes later would have nuked Cairo. Look, you nuke the desert and say you cave in, or this is going to be on your population centers or something.
Well, that's where that guy Mo, he was talking to this Admiral Martin when he was on the USS
No, we'll get to that. We'll get to that.
It was the guy. Yeah, but it was the guy Martin who basically, said they were going to nuke Cairo, and they came within 3 minutes. Now, exactly, these guys had some information. At some point, there's a lot that happens between putting the pilots on alert that are, manning the planes that carry nuclear bombs and getting these things ready to strike, especially when you're within 3 minutes. There's a lot that goes on, because a lot of these pilots, they know that they're ready, but at some point, they actually do get orders to do something, and when you're within 3 minutes and they're all in the Mediterranean, and we know that they were fully loaded with nuclear weapons because they had to go. They could not read.
How many nuclear
a lot of them took off from aircraft carriers. Okay, and the reason Martin knew that was he was an aircraft carrier, and the planes could not come back and land there because the U.S. Navy had a rule that if you take off with a nuclear device, you cannot land with a nuclear device because the risk is just too great. Okay, so then they have to go to land bases. I don't know, somewhere Spain. I think a lot of them somewhat to Greece.
Actually, is what you wrote.
They went to Greece. Okay, so when you have all these planes taken off from all these places, including in the Mediterranean on big aircraft carriers, and you have high-ranking U.S. military officials absolutely admitting that those planes were in the air and they took off, and they were within 3 minutes of nuking Cairo, and the proof that they offer is that they had to land in Greece on land because they could not land on an aircraft carrier. It was just too risky. That's very important, I think. So that gives Martin's story enormous credibility when he was having his conversation with that Mo guy.
Yeah, we'll get to that. We're jumping again, and we want to stay on target. I want to get right to the core. In other words, LBJ to order a nuke after sinking and killing 290 American sailors would have to be nuts. All right? I mean, this is not...
not just nuts. A total sociopath, psychopathic mass murderer. I mean, there are people who are nuts, but most of them are harmless, you know?
I believe as chief of staff, he doesn't have to go and get approval from Congress to do a thing like this, that he could actually pull it off. But the question is, really? He was that insane that he would endanger millions of people, and not to mention 290 American sailors, all this to take over Egypt and get the Russians out.
Well, I don't even know if it was to take over Egypt or get the Russians out so much. It was to get reelected.
Oh, no. It was way beyond that. Nasser wanted to build a dam, and the Americans, Eisenhower, turned him down. This was in 1957, I believe. The Russians came in, built the S1 dam. It has become an ecological disaster, but they took over Egypt. And he wanted to put an end to that. He wanted the Russians out. I mean, that's the number one thinking. Let's get back into the Middle East.
Well, okay. That's, the one thing about the story, it has a lot of side stories, but you raised the point about LBJ being nuts and would he sink a U.S. ship with 294 sailors just so he can start a nuclear war and with Egypt. In my opinion,
I buy every part with a nuclear part. All right,
you don't buy the nuclear part?
It's too extreme. It's too extreme. No matter how insane he is, that he would be responsible. Forget the 294 American sailors. You're talking millions of people at risk. Look. He
but
would
Barry,
get involved.
we also know from U.S. commanders on those aircraft carriers that nuclear-armed U.S. Planes took off, and they also verified that they had to land back in Egypt or Greece in Greece where they usually land. That's pretty potent stuff. I mean, we can't discount that. But I wanted to bring up another point. Give me 1 second. The other point I want to bring up is, you raised the issue is LBJ that crazy? Is he that batshit crazy? Is he that big of a sociopath? Well, there's credible evidence out there that this guy was a key player in the murder of a U.S. president. JFK. Now, we're not going to talk about that. That's another issue. That's another show. But a guy who wanted power so bad that he would knock off a very popular sitting president, John Fitzgerald Kennedy.
And he would drive in a car in the same motorcade and endanger himself. Look, let's stick with...
But let's get back, because a lot of people have done psychological profiles on LBJ, because a lot of people can't believe that we had a president that was this evil. But the more I learn about him and the more I read about him, the more I am totally 100% convinced that he is, by and large, no questions asked, the most evil president in U.S. history. And
first of all, let me add a story I always add about LBJ, and he had a very delightful sense of humor. In 1948, he stole an election from Helen somebody, a Senate seat, and he stole the votes. He was asked about that.
I spent 10 years in Texas.
Oh, come on, let me finish a sentence.
Go ahead. That's a fun story.
Let me finish a sentence. Christ. All right,
no, this is a great story. Tell it.
I can't tell it. It's not a long story, but you can't interrupt it.
Okay.
It's rude. All right. He was accused of stealing an election in 1948, and it was supposed to end his career that he stole the votes. In 1964, he got elected president, and he was asked, "Did you steal the votes?" And he answered, "I didn't steal them. I just borrowed them. I gave them back in 1964."
He was ruthless.
Yeah, but he had a good sense of humor.
Well, I don't know if that's typical of crazy.
Let's go back. Now, again, I read your report. I'm only on page 3 of 11. That's why I'm having trouble here with Robert, but we'll be okay. Now, look, let's go to the actual your report. Now, what you're talking about, I have problems with this. That, look, the planes should have sunk the Liberty, but the Israeli Navy sent torpedo boats, 3 of them, to strafe it. Now, what you wrote here is there were 2 parts to the plan. Part 1 was to knock out the communications. Part 2 was to sink the ship. Why even have a part 1? Just go in and sink the ship.
Well, because they know the ship had very powerful communications equipment, and they didn't want to give it a huge second.
They wouldn't be much good at the bottom of the Mediterranean.
Well, but the first thing the Israelis did was knock out the communication equipment. That's what set the decks ablaze with napalm and all kinds of things that caused horrific damage on the deck. So that is well documented by the USS Liberty crew. Supposedly 8 of them died in that inferno. And even the Israelis pilots, the people that Hunan interviewed said the first thing they wanted to do was knock out all communication devices because they did not want to give the USS Liberty a second to ping a message out.
So the French built torpedo boats were first, followed by the planes?
Well, yeah, with the U.S. spy ship, all the communications equipment is right there on the deck and easy to see. That's why everybody thought they were weird. Most people who have spy ships don't have them that scream, "Hey, I'm a spy ship," So knocking out the communications equipment was absolutely critical. If you look at any war, like when they went in, when they bombed Iraq or whatever, first thing they do is go out and knock out the communications equipment. Apparently, that's standard protocol for a military. If the enemy can't communicate, they're pretty much sunk. So, and that was a simple thing. The only thing is, they didn't really knock it out to the point where it was dead. It got jury-rigged by a guy who thought he could use it, so he had to butt heads with the Israeli radar jamming technology until they discovered they had a few seconds when the Israelis were dropping their bombs into the sea. But anyway, I think the big point here, we have a couple of incredible heroes here. On the U.S. side, the hero was the guy who, got the communications equipment working, and the guy who figured out how to get a message out. And then on the other side, the other big hero of the day, the super big hero of the day, are the Israeli pilots that were dropping all these bombs, supposedly for an hour and a half, although they come and they leave and they come back into the sea. And then the other part are the Israeli torpedo boats, which had enough torpedo power to sink it. So, but they just strafed it. They just, kind of machine gunned it with bullet holes. And supposedly in that article documents that when they pulled in, there was something like, 800 or 900 giant holes from machine gun fire. So why were the Israeli torpedo boats, the Israeli Navy, machine gunning the thing when they had all these huge, powerful torpedoes?
Yep. And by the way, you do quote Liberty radio man Richard Sturman that the Israeli boats had the 5 frequencies used by the ship, so they had effective jamming gear. And you asked a major question: where'd they get that from?
That's a good question. I think Israel and the U.S. share technology, don't you?
Yeah. In this case, I do buy that it was set up for Israel to knock out a plane, but America was going to go into the Middle East because they were really ticked off that Egypt sunk their plane. I do buy that scenario. It fits.
Well, then you do believe that the USS Liberty attack was a false flag attack?
Yeah, that's it. Very unsophisticated, and also human beings with emotions were involved, and they didn't want to kill Americans.
They didn't. The Israelis did not want to kill Americans.
Look, my little interview with the pilot was very straightforward. He saw the American flag and he dropped his bombs into the sea. He could not kill Americans. All right.
And this is another thing I don't know, Barry, is how many planes were in the air, how many torpedo boats were in the sea.
There were three.
I don't exactly know that.
There were 3 torpedo boats, and the first attack was 2 Israeli Mirages.
Yeah, because I just basically I'll have to go back and reread it. I just remember, the planes would come, and the planes come, and they drop their bombs, and they fly away, and they circle around, and they come back for another attack.
Well, look, the Israelis didn't panic. That's not what happened. At the top, I would say the Israelis were very rational, all in all. At the top, Moshe Dayan undoubtedly was going crazy that ship was not only not sunk, but it sent out an SOS, and the jig was up.
Exactly. Bingo. Once that SOS got pinged out, the jig was up. And here is another incredible point. The SOS that went out just said they were under attack. USS, Liberty is under attack. Please help. However, LBJ supposedly said, I will not embarrass an ally. Now, how did he know that it was being attacked by the Israelis? I mean, something about that whole thing really stinks, and I've talked to Robert about it, too. He thinks that is probably one of the most damning pieces of evidence against LBJ, is that when he said, I will not embarrass an ally, when the Pentagon got the message that U.S. Liberty and, the Navy and everybody got the message, was under attack, it's like, how did he know it was Israel?
Judy, you gotta slow down. We have to take 7 minutes off. We have a bunch of commercials. When we come back, we will ask the big question: how could LBJ not know that Israel was behind the attack when he knew the attack was coming? And this is in your report. Look, don't go away. We'll be back in 7, and we'll deal with Rob. We'll figure it all out. All right, folks, I'll see you in 7. This is Barry Chamish.
Sweet.
Gold and silver is tremendously undervalued. Global demand vastly exceeds mine supply by more than 60% annually. There is little in the financial world more certain than a coming explosion in the prices of gold and silver. The U.S. dollar continues to lose value and respect as the world's reserve currency. Our nation faces challenges on many fronts, and a day doesn't pass without another economist bringing forth warnings of impending economic calamity. There has never been a better time than right now to acquire physical gold and silver. Discount Gold and Silver Trading was founded on the principles of truth and honesty. We believe in providing a quality product, quality service, and most importantly, competitive pricing. We provide all forms of precious metals, including American gold, silver, platinum, and rare investment and circulated coins. Silver bars, rounds, and 90% silver bags are on hand for the silver investor. Gold, self-directed IRAs are available. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free, that's 1-800-375-4188.
You're listening to